The physiological/psychological impact on memory. Memories are remembered information that our mind stores. Depending on how reliable we consider our memories to be, we use them in different situations, such as being a witness or just simply trying to recall a fact. However, our memories can become more modified as the days go by. This happens even more so with individuals who have memory-impacting diseases such as hypothyroidism and Alzheimer's. They both have an effect on the brain in which the patient experiences memory loss, although one disease may be more physiological than psychological, and maybe even both. So let's jump right into it. To what extent is memory influenced by physiological issues? Hypothyroidism is an underactive thyroid gland, meaning that the thyroid gland can't make enough hormones to keep the body running normally. The thyroid gland is a small butterfly-shaped mass of tissue found in the neck just below the Adam's apple. It plays a critical role in determining how our bodies function and how we feel. Hypothyroidism isn't really known for being a mental illness, but it can have some effect on the mental health. Some symptoms include a slowed mental functioning, depression, and impaired memory. The thyroid gland produces hormones that regulate our metabolic rate, which is how much energy our body uses up. The thyroid gets its directions from the hypothalamus, which is located at the base of the brain by way of the pituitary gland. The hypothalamus produces TSH releasing hormone, TRH, that signals the pituitary to tell the thyroid gland to produce more or less of T3 and T4 by either increasing or decreasing the release of a hormone called thyroid stimulating hormone, TSH. The pituitary sends thyroid stimulating hormone, TSH, into the bloodstream. It travels to the thyroid gland and causes the release of thyroxine, or T4, which is partly converted into triiodothyronine, T3, as a response. The hypothalamus determines when levels of T4 and T3 are low and alerts the pituitary to supply more TSH. In a person with hypothyroidism, the thyroid gland does not fully respond to TSH, so levels of T3 and T4 remain low while TSH accumulates in the blood. Its common cause is an autoimmune disease, Hashimoto's thyroiditis, but the symptoms can also result from cancer or from treatment of an overactive thyroid with surgery, radiation, or medications. Dutch researchers found that high levels of TSH were correlated with memory deficits in people in their 50s and 60s, but the difference vanished when depressive symptoms were taken into account. The influence of thyroid deficiency on mental health remains uncertain. Alzheimer's disease is a type of dementia that causes problems with memory, thinking, and behavior. The greatest known risk factor is increasing age, and the majority of people with Alzheimer's are 65 and older. Approximately 200,000 Americans under the age of 65 have younger onset Alzheimer's disease, which accounts for 60 to 80% of dementia cases. Alzheimer's disease leads to nerve cell death and tissue loss throughout the brain. Over time, the brain shrinks dramatically, affecting nearly all its functions. In the Alzheimer's brain, the cortex shrivels up, damaging areas involved in thinking, planning, and remembering. Shrinkage is especially severe in the hippocampus, an area of the cortex that plays a key role in formation of new memories. Ventricles grow larger. Alzheimer's tissue has many fewer nerve cells and synapses than a healthy brain. Plaques, abnormal clusters of protein fragments, build up between nerve cells. Dead and dying nerve cells contain tangles, which are made up of twisted strands of another protein. The physiological aspect of this is rooted in the cells of the brain. Microscopic changes in the brain begin long before the first signs of memory loss. The brain has 100 billion nerve cells that are either involved in functions such as thinking, learning, and remembering, while others help us see, hear, touch, taste, and smell. Cells process and store information and communicate with other cells. Signals traveling through what is called the neuron forest form the basis of memories, thoughts, and feelings. Neurons are the chief type of cell destroyed by Alzheimer's disease. The cerebrum fills up most of your skull and is involved with remembering, problem-solving, thinking, and feeling. It also controls movement. Your brain's wrinkled surface is a specialized outer layer of the cerebrum called the cortex. Scientists have mapped the cortex by identifying areas strongly linked to certain functions. Specific regions of the cortex include interpreting sensations from your body, sights, sounds, and smells from the outside world, generating thoughts, solving problems and making plans, forming and storing memories, and controlling voluntary movement. Signals that form memories and thoughts move through an individual nerve cell as a tiny electrical charge. Nerve cells connect to one another at synapses. When a charge reaches the synapse, it may trigger release of tiny bursts of chemicals called neurotransmitters. The neurotransmitters travel across the synapse carrying signals to other cells. Scientists have identified dozens of neurotransmitters. Alzheimer's disease disrupts both the way electrical charges travel within the cells and the activity of neurotransmitters. So this brings us to ask our earlier question: to what extent is memory influenced by physiological issues? The physiological aspect affects memory for an individual with hypothyroidism in which the thyroid gland is not able to produce enough hormones for the body to function properly, although researchers claim that the effect on mental health is uncertain. In Alzheimer's disease, the cause for damaged areas involved in thinking, remembering, and planning is the nerve cell death and tissue loss in the brain. This then could lead to more severe memory loss through advanced Alzheimer's. I would say that since impaired memory through hypothyroidism isn't as severe as Alzheimer's, the biggest influence would be physiological. However, focusing on Alzheimer's, to what extent is memory influenced by psychological issues? Alzheimer's disease is the most common form of dementia and is a progressive disease that worsens over time, and individuals lose the ability to carry on a conversation and respond to their environment. Alzheimer's changes typically begin in the part of the brain that affects learning, causing the individual to have difficulty remembering newly learned information. As Alzheimer's advances through the brain, it leads to increasingly severe symptoms, including disorientation, mood and behavior changes, deepening confusion about events, time and place, unfounded suspicions about family, friends, and professional caregivers, more serious memory loss and behavior changes, and difficulty speaking, swallowing, and walking. Researchers have argued that the damage Alzheimer's causes the brain is due to a breakdown in attention rather than breakdown in memory. A new research proposed in Washington University of St. Louis claimed that older people were more likely to recall things that never really happened. This study focuses on the processes that lead to memory loss in both normal aging and in Alzheimer's, and about which specific aspects of memory are prone to breakdowns and which seem to remain intact. What they found was that older people were more susceptible to creating false memories, but researchers believe that the memory problems are due to sharp declines in portions of the brain that control the strategic processing of information once it is recalled from memory. Memory, Bellotta conducted an experiment focusing on false recall and recognition by dividing 159 individuals into 5 groups: healthy college students, healthy older adults about age 70, healthy old adults about age 85, and 2 groups of older adults with either very mild or mild symptoms of Alzheimer's-related dementia. Subjects were read a list of 12 associated words and was later asked to recall the words on the list. Although the word sleep was never presented, researchers demonstrated that many people would later recall the word and appeared to believe incorrectly that it was indeed presented as part of the list. Bellotta's studies show that young adults recall the presented words about 70% of the time, while mistakenly recall the non-presented word in about 30% of the trials, whereas healthy older adults recall the presented words about 55% of the time and the non-presented words about 37% of the time. And people with mild Alzheimer's-related dementia actually recall the item that was not presented slightly more often, 35%, than they recalled words that were actually presented, only 32%. Results from the study show how the disease influences a person's ability to acquire and retrieve new memories. A key to understanding the memory process is knowing that memories are never generated as 100% accurate, rather they are constructed from various bits and pieces of related information that the mind is able to retrieve and process. The ability to maintain attention to the mental task at hand is critical to the memory retrieval process because the mind must constantly weigh and choose among various streams of potentially correct information from a whole network of memory. The increase in false memory susceptibility among healthy older adults and individuals with Alzheimer's seems to indicate how flooded the mind is with recollections of knowledge-based associations. False memories result not from a lack of information, but from the mind's inability to process the information and reach sound conclusions. So overall, the impact of memory can be both physiological and psychological. Physiological focuses more on the functions of the brain and how that influences memory loss, while psychological explains the effect mental illnesses can have on memory, thinking, and behavior. Both aspects are extremely important to the impact on memory.